I never expected that a broken elevator would change my life. But that's exactly what happened when my building's doorman offered to help me upstairs. It was a simple gesture, an act of kindness that somehow unraveled the quiet, predictable life I had built for myself and led me somewhere I never thought I'd go. It led me to him. Let me take you back. My name is Lucas, and at the time, I was a 28-year-old copywriter who worked exclusively from home. My apartment on the 12th floor was my castle, my office, and my sanctuary all rolled into one. It was a good life, a stable life, but it was also a solitary one. Most of my human interaction came in the form of emails, video calls, and the brief, polite greetings I exchanged with my neighbors in the hallway. And, of course, with Caleb. Caleb was our building's afternoon-to-evening doorman. He wasn't just a guy who opened the door. He was a fixture, a steady presence in the grand, slightly faded lobby. He had this easy warmth that seemed to radiate from him, a smile that reached his eyes and made you feel genuinely seen. He was tall, with broad shoulders that his neat uniform couldn't quite disguise, and his dark hair always had a slight, rebellious wave to it. From my vantage point of polite distance, he seemed like the kind of person who had life figured out. He handled everything with a calm, capable air, whether it was signing for a dozen packages at once, helping an elderly woman with her groceries, or calmly de-escalating a shouting match between a tenant and a food delivery guy. I would watch him from the elevator, stealing small glances as the doors closed, and feel a pang of something I couldn't quite name. It was admiration, sure, but it was tangled up with a deep, quiet longing. Our interactions were always the same. "Good afternoon, Lucas," he'd say, his voice a low, pleasant hum. And I'd reply, "Hey, Caleb, how's it going?" Sometimes, if I was feeling particularly bold, I'd add a comment about the weather. That was the extent of it. He was the friendly, handsome doorman, and I was the quiet tenant from 12B. We existed in different orbits that only briefly intersected in the space between the front door and the elevator. I had, of course, constructed an entire narrative for him in my head. He probably had a girlfriend, a beautiful, outgoing woman who matched his own bright energy. Maybe he played softball in the park on weekends or went on long hikes upstate. He was, in my mind, a perfect example of well-adjusted, confident, and almost certainly straight manhood. He was completely and utterly unattainable, which made the quiet crush I was nursing both perfectly safe and profoundly lonely. I was content to let it stay that way, a little secret I kept for myself. It was a harmless fantasy that added a tiny spark to my otherwise routine-filled days. I would think about him while waiting for my coffee to brew, or picture his easy smile when a project was getting particularly frustrating. It was my own private world, one where the distance between us was a protective wall. I never imagined that wall was about to be demolished, piece by piece, by the most mundane of urban failures. It started on a Tuesday. I remember the day clearly because I just sprained my ankle the weekend before, a clumsy misstep off a curb while lost in thought. It wasn't a serious injury, just a painful, swollen mess that had me hobbling around my apartment in a compression bandage, feeling deeply sorry for myself. The doctor had said to stay off it as much as possible, which was easy enough since I worked from home. The real challenge was navigating the outside world. That afternoon, a sign was taped to the elevator doors. It was printed in a large, apologetic font. Elevator out of service for extensive repairs. Estimated downtime, 1 week. I read it 3 times, a feeling of dread sinking into my stomach. 1 week. 12 flights of stairs. On a sprained ankle. It felt like a cosmic joke, and I was definitely not laughing. I stood there for a long moment, clutching my tote bag full of groceries and trying to strategize. Maybe I could make one trip up and just not leave my apartment for 7 days straight. It seemed plausible. I took a deep breath, adjusted my grip, and prepared to begin the long, painful trek. "That looks like a challenge." Caleb's voice startled me. He had come to stand beside me, his gaze moving from the sign to my bandaged ankle and back again. There was a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. I tried for a casual laugh, but it came out as more of a nervous croak. "Yeah, you could say that. The timing is just impeccable, isn't it?" I shifted my weight, and a sharp throb of pain shot up my leg, making me wince. He noticed immediately. His professional, friendly demeanor softened into something else, something more personal. "You're on the 12th floor, right?" "Lucas from 12B. I was surprised he knew my exact apartment number. That's me, I confirmed, feeling a ridiculous flush of pleasure. He looked at my grocery bag, then at my face, a thoughtful expression settling on his features. He seemed to be making a decision. Listen, he said, his tone firm but gentle. Don't be ridiculous. You can't carry that all the way up 12 flights on a bad ankle. Let me help you. I immediately started to protest. It was his job to man the front desk, not to be my personal Sherpa. Oh, no, you don't have to do that. I can manage. I'll just take it slow. The words sounded weak even to my own ears. The thought of each and every one of those 144 steps felt monumental. Caleb just shook his head, a small, determined smile playing on his lips. It's a quiet afternoon. Nothing's going to happen down here for 20 minutes. And I'm not going to watch you torture yourself. Before I could argue further, he reached out and took the heavy tote bag from my hand. The brief brush of his fingers against mine sent a surprising jolt through me. Come on, he said, already heading for the fire door that led to the stairwell. We'll take it slow. And just like that, the predictable rhythm of my life was broken. I found myself following him into the dim, echoey quiet of the stairwell, my heart pounding for reasons that had very little to do with the impending climb. The solid metal door clicked shut behind us, sealing us in together, and the great ascent began. That first climb was an exercise in awkward intimacy. The stairwell was narrow and smelled faintly of dust and old paint. The only sounds were our footsteps on the concrete and our increasingly labored breathing as we went up. Caleb took the lead, carrying my groceries as if they weighed nothing, pausing at every landing to let me catch up. I was intensely aware of him, of the way the muscles in his back moved under his uniform, of the quiet, encouraging words he offered every time I grimaced in pain. We're almost at the 4th floor. Doing great, he'd say, turning to look at me with that steady, reassuring gaze. I, on the other hand, felt like a mess. I was sweaty, out of breath, and my ankle was screaming in protest. I was used to being self-sufficient, to handling things on my own. Leaning on someone, literally and figuratively, felt foreign and deeply vulnerable. I tried to fill the silence with apologetic murmurs. I'm so sorry about this. You really don't have to. Stop apologizing, he said gently from the landing above me. Anyone would do it, but here's the thing. I knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would. Not everyone would notice, or care enough to offer. He did. By the time we reached the 8th floor, a strange sort of rhythm had set in. The initial awkwardness began to melt away, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. We were a team, tackling this ridiculous challenge together. It was on that landing, while I was leaning against the cool concrete wall, trying to catch my breath, that our first real conversation happened. So, a copywriter, he said, breaking the silence. That must be interesting. You get to work in your pajamas all day. I managed a small laugh. Sometimes. It's mostly just me, my laptop, and a looming deadline. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. I hesitated, then decided to ask something in return. It felt only fair. What about you? Is this what you always wanted to do? I immediately regretted the question. It sounded condescending, as if I were judging his job. But Caleb didn't seem to take it that way. He leaned against the railing, looking thoughtful. No, he said, his voice softer now. It's a good job. It pays the bills. But it's not the end goal. He paused, and for a second, I thought that was all he was going to say. But then he continued, almost as if he were thinking aloud. I build furniture. Or I'm trying to. I have a little workshop space out in Queens. I spend my weekends there. The dream is to do that full-time, open my own small shop. I was completely taken aback. I had pictured him playing softball in the park, not meticulously crafting things from wood. It was a detail so specific and so unexpected that it felt like a small, precious gift. It cracked open the perfect, confident image I had of him and revealed something far more interesting underneath. A person with dreams and aspirations, someone who was working towards something. Wow, I said, and the word was full of genuine awe. That's amazing, Caleb. A faint blush colored his cheeks, and he looked down at my grocery bag, suddenly seeming a little shy. It's just a hobby for now. No, it's not, I insisted, feeling a sudden surge of conviction. It's a passion. That's incredible. He looked up and met my eyes, and in that moment, something shifted between us. The polite barrier between tenant and doorman dissolved completely, replaced by a flicker of genuine connection. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile this time, and it was like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. Thanks, Lucas. We finally reached the 12th floor, and I felt a strange mix of profound relief and a tiny bit of disappointment. As I fumbled for my keys, my hands were shaking slightly. Caleb placed the grocery bag gently on the floor beside my door. Thank you so much, Caleb. I honestly don't know how I would have managed that, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. Don't mention it, he replied, his voice still a little breathless from the climb. He lingered for a moment, as if there was something else he wanted to say. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Well, he said finally, I should get back downstairs. Right? Of course. As he turned to go, I noticed a strap on my work satchel, which I'd been wearing, had gotten twisted. Before I could even register it, Caleb reached out, his movements quick and natural. Here, you're all twisted up, he murmured. His fingers brushed against the fabric of my shirt, just over my collarbone, as he straightened the strap. The touch was brief, almost non-existent, but it sent a wave of heat through my entire body. It was an impossibly small, thoughtless gesture that felt earth-shatteringly significant. He pulled his hand back quickly, as if he'd been burned. See you tomorrow, Lucas, he said, and then he was gone, his footsteps echoing as he headed back down the stairs. I stood there for a long time, my hand resting on the spot he had touched, the warmth of it seeping into my skin. I finally unlocked my door and went inside, my quiet apartment feeling strangely empty. The elevator was broken for a week, which meant this would happen again tomorrow. And the day after that, my heart gave a hopeful, terrifying leap. The next few days fell into a new, unbelievable routine. Every afternoon, around 5:30, I would head downstairs to get takeout or just a breath of fresh air, and Caleb would be waiting. He never made a big deal out of it, just a simple, ready for the climb? As if it were the most natural thing in the world for him to escort me up 12 flights of stairs every single day. Our conversations in the stairwell became the highlight of my day. We talked about everything and nothing. I learned that his favorite author was a fantasy writer I'd never heard of, and that he listened to audiobooks during the quiet hours of his shift. He learned that I was a terrible cook and subsisted mostly on Thai food, and that I had a nervous habit of tapping my fingers when I was thinking through a difficult work project. He told me more about his woodworking. He described the smell of fresh-cut cedar, the satisfying heft of a well-balanced tool, the patient process of turning a raw piece of wood into something beautiful and functional. His voice would change when he talked about it, losing its professional edge and taking on a low, passionate hum. It was a side of him I never would have guessed existed, a hidden world of artistry and dedication behind the crisp uniform and friendly smile. One afternoon, he confessed something that made my heart ache for him. You know, sometimes I feel like a bit of a fraud, he admitted, pausing on the 9th floor landing. I'm 32. I tell people I'm a woodworker, but I spend 40 hours a week opening doors. My parents, they think it's just a silly hobby. They want me to get a real career. It was a moment of pure, unvarnished vulnerability. He was looking at me not as the capable doorman, but as a man with insecurities, with a dream that felt fragile and distant. It was in that moment that my simple crush deepened into something far more potent, more real. I saw past the handsome exterior to the thoughtful, slightly anxious, and incredibly passionate person within. It's not a fraud if it's what you love, I said, my voice quiet but firm. And it's not silly. It takes courage to build something, Caleb, whether it's with words or with wood. He looked at me, his dark eyes searching my face, and the gratitude I saw there was so profound it almost took my breath away. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't need to. We just stood there in the quiet of the stairwell, a new understanding passing between us. The air felt thick with unspoken things. The physical toll of the daily climb was also, paradoxically, bringing us closer. There was an inherent intimacy in the shared struggle. Some days, my ankle would be particularly sore, and my limp would be more pronounced. Without a word, Caleb would slow his pace to match mine perfectly. On one occasion, I nearly stumbled, and his hand shot out, steadying me with a firm grip on my arm. He held on a second longer than necessary, his thumb rubbing a small, comforting circle against my sleeve before he let go. My skin tingled for the rest of the evening. Little moments like that became the focal point of my entire existence. I would replay them in my mind, analyzing every glance, every brief touch, every intonation in his voice. Was this just him being kind? Or was there something more? The hope was a fragile, fluttering thing in my chest, constantly at war with the fear that I was projecting my own desires onto his simple decency. He was just a nice guy, my brain would insist. But my heart wasn't so sure. The turning point came on Friday evening, the 5th day of our strange new ritual. It had been a brutal day for me. A huge project I'd been working on for weeks had hit a major snag, and I'd spent 12 straight hours in front of my laptop, rewriting and restructuring until my eyes burned and my brain felt like mush. I was exhausted, stressed, and my ankle was throbbing with a dull, persistent ache. When I finally hobbled into the lobby that evening, I must have looked as bad as I felt. Caleb's smile faltered when he saw me. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I could only nod, too tired to even form words. "You have no idea," I mumbled. "All right," he said, his tone shifting into something soft and protective. "Let's get you home." That night's climb was different. I was leaning on the handrail heavily, my energy completely spent. Caleb stayed close beside me, not in front, as if ready to catch me if I fell. He kept up a quiet, soothing monologue, talking about a funny thing that happened in the lobby earlier, telling me about a new coffee shop that had opened a few blocks away. He was trying to distract me, and I was overwhelmingly grateful for it. By the time we reached the 12th floor, I was practically leaning against him. My legs felt like jelly, and a wave of dizziness washed over me as we stepped into the hallway. "Whoa, easy there," Caleb said, his arm wrapping firmly around my waist to steady me. I mumbled another apology, fumbling in my pocket for my keys. My fingers were clumsy, and the keys slipped, clattering onto the floor. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my head spinning. "I'm just so tired." "Don't worry about it. I've got you," he said, his voice a low rumble next to my ear. He bent down to pick up the keys, his arm never leaving my waist. When he straightened up, we were impossibly close. My back was against the wall next to my apartment door, and he was standing in front of me, his body shielding mine. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel the warmth of his body, smell the faint, clean scent of his laundry detergent mixed with something uniquely him. I looked up, and my gaze met his. The hallway was quiet, the air thick and heavy. His eyes, usually so full of easy warmth, were dark now, intense. His gaze dropped to my lips, and then back up to my eyes. Everything seemed to slow down. The pounding in my ears was the only sound I could hear. This was it. This was the moment where the entire world narrows down to the few inches of space between two people. He was going to kiss me. I was sure of it. I could feel the energy crackling between us, a tangible thing that made the hair on my arms stand up. I might have leaned in slightly. I can't be sure. My entire being was screaming for it. He took a small, sharp breath. His arm tightened around my waist for a fraction of a second. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, doubt, fear, hesitation, and then it was gone. He blinked, and the spell was broken. He took a step back, pulling his arm away. The sudden loss of his warmth felt like a physical blow. The air rushed back into the space between us, cold and empty. He cleared his throat, and the sound was unnaturally loud in the silent hallway. "Here are your keys," he said, his voice strained. He pressed them into my hand, carefully avoiding my fingers. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. "Thank you," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. My body was thrumming with the aftershock of what had almost happened. "Right. Well, get some rest, Lucas," he said, his tone suddenly brisk and professional. And without another word, he turned and walked quickly towards the stairwell, his footsteps echoing down the hall. He didn't look back. I stood frozen against the wall for what felt like an eternity, my heart hammering against my ribs. I finally managed to unlock my door and stumble inside, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of confusion, hope, and crushing disappointment. What just happened? It was almost a kiss. It was the most intense, earth-shattering almost kiss of my entire life. But almost is a universe away from did, and as I stood alone in my dark apartment, the silence was deafening. The next day, Saturday, was excruciating. The easy camaraderie we had built over the week was gone, shattered into a million pieces. In its place was a thick, impenetrable wall of awkwardness. I replayed the moment in the hallway 1,000 times, analyzing it from every possible angle. Had I imagined it? Had I completely misread the situation? Maybe he was just steadying me, and my tired, crush-addled brain had invented the rest. The thought was humiliating. I pictured him going back downstairs, shaking his head and thinking about how the quiet guy from 12B had practically thrown himself at him. The anxiety was a physical thing, a tight knot in my stomach that made it impossible to eat or focus. I avoided leaving my apartment all day. I couldn't face him. I couldn't bear to see the pity or discomfort in his eyes. I ordered food to be left at my door and watched from my window as the city moved on, completely oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. I was caught in a painful limbo, suspended between the hope of what I thought I'd felt and the terrifying fear of rejection. By Sunday, I knew I couldn't hide forever. My groceries were running low, and more importantly, I couldn't live in this state of agonizing uncertainty. I decided I had to face him. I would be cool, casual, and polite. I would act as if nothing had happened. Maybe if I pretended it was normal, it would become normal again, and we could at least go back to the friendly acquaintanceship we had before. It was a flimsy plan, but it was the only one I had. When I got down to the lobby that afternoon, my heart was pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Caleb was at the desk, sorting mail. He looked up when the stairwell door opened, and his eyes met mine for a brief second before flicking away. The easy smile he usually gave me was gone, replaced by a tight, neutral expression. "Caleb," I said, my voice sounding much calmer than I felt. "Lucas," he replied, his tone clipped and professional. He didn't look up from the mail. The knot in my stomach tightened. So this was it. He was shutting me out. We were back to being strangers. Only this time it was worse, because we both knew what we were pretending not to know. I walked past the desk and out the front doors, the silence in the lobby feeling heavier than any conversation. The walk to the grocery store was a blur. I bought things I didn't need, my mind entirely preoccupied. I had been so stupid. I had mistaken his kindness for something more and ruined the one bright spot in my solitary routine. When I returned to the building, my shoulders slumped in defeat. I saw a notice taped to the front door. "Elevator repairs complete. The elevator is now back in service. We apologize for the inconvenience." My heart sank. It was over. The excuse for our daily interactions, the scaffolding upon which our fragile connection had been built, was gone. There would be no more climbs, no more conversations in the quiet stairwell, no more chances to figure out what that moment in the hallway had really meant. I would just press a button, ascend to the 12th floor, and he would remain a fixture in the lobby, a world away. I walked inside, my grocery bag feeling 100 times heavier than it had a week ago. Caleb was still at the desk. I was determined to just walk past, head for the newly functional elevator, and retreat back to the safety of my apartment. I would accept this defeat with as much dignity as I could muster. But as I passed the desk, his voice stopped me. "Lucas, wait." I paused, my back to him, not daring to turn around. My entire body was tense, braced for, I didn't know what. A formal apology for any misunderstanding? A polite goodbye? Can we talk for a second?" he asked. His voice was quiet, and it held a note of nervousness that I had never heard from him before. Slowly, I turned to face him. He had come out from behind the desk and was standing a few feet away. He was wringing his hands, a gesture so at odds with his usual calm demeanor that it took me by surprise. He still wasn't quite meeting my eyes. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "Listen, about the other night, in the hallway. He trailed off, struggling for the words. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I acted weird. My heart ached. This was it. The letdown. It's fine, Caleb. Don't worry about it," I said, trying to make it easy for him, trying to protect my own bruised feelings. "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not fine. Because it wasn't nothing. At least, not for me." He finally looked up, and his eyes were full of a desperate, raw honesty. "The truth is, Lucas, I wanted to kiss you." The words hung in the air between us, echoing in the quiet lobby. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what he'd just said. He wanted to kiss me. All my anxiety, all my overthinking, all my fear of rejection, It all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated relief. "I've wanted to for a while now," he continued, the words tumbling out of him in a rush. "This past week, climbing those stairs with you, talking to you, it's been the best part of my day, every day. And Friday night, I panicked. You're a tenant. I'm staff. There are rules. I was terrified of crossing a line, of misreading everything and losing my job, and making you hate me." He looked so vulnerable standing there, laying all his own fears bare. The confident doorman was gone, and in his place was just Caleb, a man who was just as scared and uncertain as I was. A slow smile spread across my face. I felt giddy, lightheaded with a joy so intense, it was almost painful. "You wouldn't have been misreading it," I said softly. His eyes widened, searching my face for confirmation. Really, I confirmed. "I wanted you to kiss me too." A look of profound relief washed over his features, and he took a hesitant step closer. "So, now that the elevator is fixed," he started, a shy smile touching his lips for the first time. "Does that mean?" I closed the remaining distance between us. "I think," I said, my voice full of a confidence I didn't know I possessed, "that it means you don't have to panic anymore." And then I leaned in, and he met me halfway. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then firm and sure as I kissed him back. It wasn't like the frantic, charged moment in the hallway. This was gentle and certain and full of all the words we hadn't been able to say. It was a kiss that tasted of relief and the promise of a new beginning. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine, both of us breathing a little shakily. "So," he murmured against my lips, "when I get off my shift, can I come up to the 12th floor? The proper way this time." I laughed, a real, happy sound that echoed in the grand old lobby. I think I'd like that very much. The professional boundary was gone. The distance had been closed, and for the first time, the future felt wide open and full of possibility. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a long, quiet dream. Our first real date was a walk through the park, no stairs involved. We held hands, and Caleb told me more about his woodworking plans, not with insecurity, but with a renewed excitement. I told him about the novel I'd always wanted to write, but had been too afraid to start. It felt like we were sharing not just our present, but our potential futures, too. Soon, seeing Caleb at the end of his shift became our new routine. He would come up in the elevator, his uniform swapped for jeans and a soft t-shirt, and my small, quiet apartment would suddenly feel like a home. We'd cook dinner together, or rather, he would cook, and I would watch, endlessly fascinated by the capable way he moved around my tiny kitchen. We'd sit on my sofa, our legs tangled together, and talk for hours, filling in the details of our lives that we'd missed. He was even more wonderful than the man I had imagined from afar. He was kind and funny, with a gentle soul and a fierce dedication to the people and things he loved. One evening, he brought me a gift. It was a small, exquisitely crafted wooden box, its surface sanded so smooth it felt like silk. The lid fit perfectly. "It's made of maple," he said, watching my face as I ran my fingers over the intricate grain. "I wanted you to have something I made." I looked from the beautiful box to his hopeful, earnest face, and my heart felt so full I thought it might burst. It was the most thoughtful gift I had ever received. That box now sits on my nightstand, a constant, tangible reminder of his passion and his love. Life has a funny way of working out. You can spend years living in a comfortable, predictable routine, thinking you know exactly what your life is. You build walls to keep yourself safe, to manage your expectations, and protect yourself from disappointment. You convince yourself that certain kinds of happiness are for other people. But then, something unexpected happens. A machine breaks down. An inconvenience disrupts your carefully planned world and forces you onto a different path. And on that path, you might just find someone who is willing to walk alongside you, to help you carry your burdens, to pause with you when you need to catch your breath. Caleb and I still marvel at it sometimes. How two people could live in the same building, seeing each other nearly every day, and yet remain worlds apart until a broken elevator forced us together. It took 144 steps, climbed over and over, to close the distance. Looking back, I wouldn't change a single one. It turns out, sometimes the longest, most difficult way up is the one that leads you exactly where you were always meant to be.